Cyber Shinobi. Zeed again. Perhaps you recall the evil army of villains called Zeed. Everyone thought they had been defeated by the great Joe Musashi, but some had escaped. Long after that dark age had passed, in the year 20XXX, a force of robots and men began attacking atomic power plants in countries all over the world. The plutonium they stole was the equivalent of 100,000 megatons of explosive power. The words Cyber-Zeed were always written at the scene of these crimes, and the world soon learned what they planned to do. Cyber-Zeed intended to use their nuclear capability to terrorize the world. Every nation sent its best forces against Cyber-Zeed in a desperate attempt to stop this threat, but all were defeated. Not a single man survived. Then, in the world's darkest hour, he appeared. Joe Musashi, grandson of the one who crushed Zeed so many years ago, came forward to battle this great evil. Joe must fight those who rose from the ashes of Zeed and stop them from unleashing their deadly nuclear missile force. He alone stands against Cyber-Zeed. You know, not for nothing. That's kind of an impressive visual effect for a Master System game. Oh boy. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play the Cyber Shinobi. Technically Shinobi Part 2 because this is I think supposed to be a direct sequel to Shinobi 1 on the Master System. However, similarly to Shadow Dancer, this was only ever released in Europe and Brazil because the Master System had ceased production and sales in other regions. And that means not only does the game run at 50 FPS natively, or 50 hertz, this game runs like complete dog shit. It's maybe 12 to 15 frames a second at best. Alright, control-wise, it's about what you'd expect. Button 1's your attack button, but your attack range is really weird because you don't have a proper slice or shuriken. It's a draw and resheath of the sword. Either way, you have a lot more range than you'd think. And your jump, well, it's a jump. Though something the game doesn't tell you unless you look in the manual is that the game has a super jump done by holding up and jumping. With that said, you're gonna need to learn to do that pretty quick because it's required to make certain jumps as soon as the halfway point in the first section of the game. Otherwise, there's what we got on the top of the screen there. The timer's self-explanatory. Beat the stage before that ends. Otherwise, I believe it's just a life lost. Life is self-explanatory. Power is more or less how much damage your sword is doing, and you get upgrades to that sparingly throughout the game. And while you think, oh wow, if you get the power max, it must be super strong, yes, in terms of pure mathematical damage. But this game does something where it, similar to, I guess, Castlevania 3 on NES in a way, where enemies that we see at the start of the game are still enemies you see at the end of the game, but their HP is boosted tremendously. So if anything, you want to get the P markers to get your power up, because otherwise the enemies will just become a complete pain in the ass to deal with. Ninjutsu is increased by getting N markers, and the ninjutsu in this game is like it was in Shadow Dancer. It's all screen nukes. It all uses, I think, 2 units on your ninjutsu bar, but which one you use, I think, depends on how much you have. I think it's if you have 2, you use fire. Tornado is at 4, the same one from Shadow Dancer Genesis. I think it's lightning at 6 and earth at 8. And shot is our shurikens, so to speak, but they're used more like sub-weapons from the Castlevania games. Be careful whenever you're in this section, by the way, because the even-numbered floors fall if you stand on them for too long, like that, and that kind of comes out of nowhere if you're not prepared for it, so be careful to die probably out of nowhere here, a lot. Either way, going back to the shurikens, the shots are obviously your sub-weapons, so you use them the same way as the sub-weapons in Castlevania, up in the attack button. The shuriken is pretty self-explanatory. It's a slow projectile that just moves straight forward, though as we get more shot power-ups, even if I believe the shot is empty, or maybe it has to be full. I can't exactly remember for that part. It gets upgraded. So now we have the pistol weapon from Shinobi 1, which is a faster projectile that does more damage. By upgrading that again, we'll get the grenade, which is just absolutely, absurdly powerful. And that obviously being a grenade, you throw that in an arc, but its explosion has a surprisingly large radius. We'll get to see that, I think, next stage, because you can get at least your sub-weapons fully upgraded pretty quickly. And something I should also note about the shot-type weapons, you can run out of ammo for them technically. If, say, I use up all my pistol ammo right now, it would revert back to the Shuriken. So even though I have 8 shots of pistol, I technically have 16 shots of long-range weapons left. Also, level 1 is pretty tedious. If it's not the out-of-nowhere gotcha traps, which also persist into at least stage 2, it's the repeat level design of ride elevator, kill enemies, that makes it super tedious. If it wasn't for the game running badly, this would be bad enough, but partnered with how slow this game is, which admittedly partially is probably because for the Master System, these are again pretty impressive sprites, comparable, not as good as the ones in Shadow Dancer on Master System, but still good. But Shadow Dancer ran better than this. This is bad. Either way, we are thankfully approaching the end of stage 1. By the way, it's whenever something is roughly 2 boxes tall that you need to use the super jump to climb up it. The boss of stage 1, if I'm recalling their name correctly, is Crazy Bull. It's a goddamn bulldozer. The only weak point of it is the cockpit, though. With that said, its attack pattern, pretty simple. It moves left trying to crush you. You jump on it. You hit it. It moves back to the right. Rinse and repeat. I forget if it goes all the way to the left if it starts doing the same thing from the left, or if it just comes back from the right, though. Because I don't think I've ever let it do that, because as long as you super jump with the correct timing, this boss doesn't get to do much, which, gonna just say right now, little bit of a pattern throughout the game. There's a reason out of this, 5 games I've now done for this marathon, only 1 has been more than 1 part long? Yeah, thankfully the next couple are probably going to be more than 1 part long, without a doubt. In fact, the next one definitely is, because just remember what the next one is. Ugh, the final stage alone. Level 2 is more of the same. In fact, dare I say, in terms of stage variety, the Shinobi is probably the least interesting game in the series compared to the time it came out. Because Shadow Dancer Master System didn't have much going on, but there was at least, there was a platforming level, there was more visual variety and stuff. This game is the worst in any of that kind of regard, because there's, outside of 1 stage, okay, maybe 2 stages, no actual gimmicks that aren't just the gotcha blocks, which are back in this stage, by the way. More or less, anywhere you see an enemy standing is definitively safe. Anywhere else, be a little more skeptical, maybe not stand on it for longer than half a second, constantly be jumping and all that. Also, something that makes this game much more annoying than any of the other games we've played thus far, and probably the only reason this video is 26 minutes long instead of maybe 20 at most, the game forces beat-em-up logic on you at certain cases, in certain intervals rather, where in order to progress, you need to kill every enemy. Whereas every other game we played thus far, you can walk past a lot of the enemies and be completely fine. Usually the enemies are either for points, getting the bombs in Shadow Dancer in particular, or just to make sure you don't die. And that's part of the reason the stages can also last surprisingly long compared to the length of the game, because there are, is it 5 or 6 stages here? I think it's 6, but 2 of them are just super short. Yeah, that seems right. Also, this is the power of the grenade that took out all 3 of those enemies up there, despite the explosion. Now we're not looking nearly that big. Mind you, that would imply that the explosion has any kind of interesting effect. Either way, also, even though I did it on screen, I think in both of the prior games, something that occurs to me I don't think I mentioned thus far about every Shinobi game past Revenge of the Shinobi is you can crouch walk, and that is a decent way to get past enemy projectiles. I don't think that ability was in either of the first 2 games that we've covered chronologically. So, hey, that's important. God, that's dickish. Well, you can at least tell which ones are going to fall right then and there because they loaded in a little bit differently. Again, that I believe is a circumstance of how the Master System handled its graphics, where there's only a background and a sprite layer, and the sprite layer loaded in about a fraction of a second later. I would say whoops, but no, that was pretty common. Now, the odd thing about this game is, from what I can tell, partially because it was only released in Europe, in Brazil. I don't even think there was a Japanese release for this one. Not that I can find online, at least. Yeah, Europe, Australia, and Brazil. It wasn't even released in Japan. Is due to that little factoid of it not having a Japanese release, its lore is surprisingly consistent. Because the manual isn't word for word what we saw in the intro cutscene, but it's the exact same ideas. In fact, if anything, it's shorter and more, well kept. For instance, well, you can just go back and look at what the intro dialogue was, but here it just says, Cyber-Zeed, the villains who previously tried to destroy the world, are back. Zeed's army is stealing plutonium from the power plants. Their goal is to melt down the planet. All the world's nations joined forces in an attempt to end this chaos. Thousands of troops were sent out, but none were successful. Then Joe Musashi appeared, the grandson of the brave ninja who had defeated Cyber-Zeed years ago. I'd like to note Cyber-Zeed is only in this game. That's Neo-Zeed I think they're trying to talk about, maybe. Joe is the only one who can use the 4 types of ninjutsu: fire, tornado, lightning, and earth element. No mention to Heart. Oh, poor Mott-T, or whatever that character's name was. He is the only hope. Be Joe Musashi and wipe out Cyber-Zeed for good. You know, I would call out the laziness of calling the new main character the same name as the old main character. Like, it's one thing if it's like a title, but like at the same time, I think back, and I knew a lot of people in like elementary and middle school and even high school. Well, actually, those would all be the exact same people now that I think about it, given that I stayed in the same town the entire time, who were named after their grandfathers. So admittedly, that is probably some of the best writing we've seen in the lore dump thus far in terms of realism. By the way, time for the second boss. This one's not going to be around too long. This is, I think, Seabat? Its only attack is to fire missiles at you. Its only weak point is the missiles it fires at you, so try and place wherever you are relative to where it's coming up and kill it quickly. It's pretty easy. I don't want to say Cyber Shinobi's the easiest Shinobi game, but it's definitely up there. The easiest one is either this or Shinobi 1. Because neither have the one-hit kill function. Both are very bare mechanically. It's just a factor of whether or not you'll have trouble with certain boss fights at that point. And I think... honestly, no, Shinobi 1 probably has harder boss fights. Super jump over these bombs, by the way, because otherwise they will kill you. Well, they won't kill you. They don't instant kill you. I don't think anything in this game, barring maybe the odd bottomless pit, is instant kill. But still, you don't want it to happen all the same. Stage 3 is odd in that it persists an odd pattern in the game, because this and Stage 5 are so super short, it makes me wonder why they couldn't just make one stage that's longer rather than 2 stages that are so nothing. But that said, there is one particularly annoying enemy type here. Those are astronauts on jetpacks. They die on one hit, yes, but they move so fast relative to the delay of your attack, which is comparable to the delay on Simon Belmont's whip, that hitting them without getting hit yourself presents a little bit of a task. Thankfully, this game drops life in life crates like that often enough to not be much of a problem. But you'll still take some damage throughout this game no matter what. And we're already at the boss. This is Heli Blast. Its only attack is to drop the same missiles we saw earlier, while moving up and down across the screen, meaning you have to adjust your timing of your jumps every time. In order to hit it, just slash at the gun/cockpit. It'll die eventually. And it's done. That stage... You know what? Honestly, I think I'd prefer it if every stage in the game was that length. And I am impressed with one thing. They bothered to program different timer lengths. Most of the stages in the game have a time limit of 10 minutes. Which I'm not sure if that actually is going down in real time. It could be slower. No, actually, that looks about accurate to real time. I would rather the game have 6 5-minute long stages than 6 10-minute long stages, because that means I'm done with it quicker. Now, I'm not saying this is a factor of I got other shit to do. I just don't want to spend longer than 40 minutes on this game in my lifetime, ever, really. Unfortunately, that's already happened because I practiced each stage before recording it. This is probably... I don't want to say the hardest stage in the game. In terms of pure damage, that's definitely stage 6. But this is definitely the most out to kill you and damage you stage, because it's got a lot of hazards, be it rolling rocks that you need to duck under, bird statues you need to kick out of the way, and you can only kick the bottom one out of the way. The other ones do nothing. Or just straight up spike traps trying to impale you. There's also a couple of dick moves like that. It's hard to tell, but on the few wooden bridge sections in this stage, there are decisively 2 different log types. Those, the 3rd through 6th ones of those are the ones that fall, and all these other ones aren't. The only way you can tell is by paying attention to them closely. The shading is slightly different on them. I think there actually is more rings on the ones that don't fall too. Either way, especially given the flashy background of the stage due to the water, it's hard to exactly see that happening. In fact, I really hope the bitrate of this video doesn't get murdered by the background of this section and this background of the next stage, because it's Bubble Man stage and Mega Man 2 all over again, honestly. By and large, the rule I've kind of established for the Shinobi games of if you're having trouble, just take things slowly still persists, but there's times like that where no matter how slowly you take it, you're just going to get surprised and killed. And by and large, that is technically a thing in all the other games as well. But the other games all control much better, because something I also haven't mentioned about this game is we're back to Shadow Dancer Master System controls, in that when you make a jump, you are dedicated to that jump's arc until the end of it. Slightly. You can slightly hold back and change it, but it's like saying that you can shift your power from 100 to 99 in 6 seconds. The difference, if at all, is minimal. By the way, boss at this stage is, I think this thing's name is Black Tiger. This thing's pattern. It starts on the right side of the screen, charges at you, tries to jump into you and maul you. But the moment you hit it, it gets sent back to the right and starts again. Again, the boss fights in this game aren't really much of anything to deal with. Honestly, the only boss I'd say is competent as a boss is the final boss. And even then, that's mostly because it has more than a move. Also, something super important. The Shinobi games are a little bit inconsistent about one thing, and that's whether or not your HP gets recovered after a stage. I think Revenge of the Shinobi, it doesn't happen. I forget if Shinobi 1 did it. And this game definitely does it. Alright, welcome to Stage 5. Stage 5 is a bit odd in that, by and large, it plays out closer to being a bonus stage. Because there's no enemies in this stage. There's just a waterfall with platforms placed all over it containing upgrades, be it to your power, shot restoratives, ninjutsu power-ups, things like that. The only enemy in this stage is the boss at the bottom of the waterfall. And if you want to reach that quickly, just press jump and fall down the middle of the stage. You'll probably make it there faster than if you didn't do this. I want to get as many of the power-up items as I can, though, so thankfully I have the level design memorized to enough of a point I'll know where I want to get, where the things I want to get are. This game's soundtrack isn't even anything too spectacular, and that says something, because I actually kind of liked Shadow Dancer on Genesis, barring its bit-crunched voice acting in at least one instance. And Shinobi 1's soundtrack was minimal, but catchy. This has a unique song for every stage, but they're all pretty bad. I think the only theme I kind of like is the credits theme. But I can't tell if that's because I actually like the composition or because I'm just glad it's all over. Either way, boss of this stage is the Red Hopper. It jumps and eventually fires out some little bombs out of either side, I think. It also dies super quickly. With that, thankfully, we're on to the final stage. Thank God. The final stage is definitely the one that's the hardest, partially because it's one long, uninterrupted stage without a checkpoint. Usually whenever there's like a fade to black in the other stages, that count as a checkpoint. If you die here, I think you're back to the start of it outside of the boss fight. With that said, every enemy in the game is here, including a new one. Walls. If these get too close together, I believe it's instant kill. But honestly, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. We also now have electric gates. Okay. Look at that. The game's trying to actually do something unique in a stage. The biggest threat here, though, are going to be some auto turrets that patrol the stage vertically like these ones. They fire in order that's like duck, jump, and duck, but you need to be careful of them all the same, because if you're anywhere to the left of them, you're just in danger of being shot. With that said, the best strategy to get around them, just get to the right of them with the enemies still on screen. They can't touch you then, now can they? It's almost sad to say, but I think in terms of competence in new level mechanics, new anything, and running well, some of the really shitty Game Boy games out there on the original Game Boys, when in particular I'm talking about, probably were better games. Except maybe Rocky and Bullwinkle on Game Boy. That's still potentially the worst game I've ever played. Either way, time for the final boss. This is the Side Gunner. It's got a couple of different attacks for once. It can reach its arm across the way, shoot out of its dick gun, or fire grenades out of the cannon on the top of it. It can also charge directly at you, but that's actually a good thing, because that's the only time you can damage it. Also, here's the animations for the magic that I used so far. I think I only used the Earth and Lightning Elemental. Not for nothing, that's a detail face sprite. Oh, bless you, game, you're trying. I'm not even sure if that did any damage, because while the shield is up, I don't think you can damage the boss at all, even if, say, you threw a grenade over there. And what the boss does is large you up the chance, so you can have a lot of times where it isn't damageable, or it could just charge at you nonstop like a madman like it just did. The grenades is probably the hardest attack to dodge, because the grenades themselves are a hitbox, as is the explosions. My best advice is to just wait for them to come to you and then jump over the one that's on the far left. Why is the third tier magic spell more impressive looking than the fourth tier one? And that's the final boss. At this point, we just have to attack the brain, and we're good. As soon as the explosion finishes exploding. Can you please? Thank you. And that's game! Time for a text crawl again. Joy. You foiled my plans! You're going to die with me, Joe Musashi! With those final words, Mother Brain exploded. Miraculously, Joe survived and managed to stop all the nuclear missiles from going off. Joe's long battle had ended, and once again, the world became peaceful. Whatever became of Joe, no one knows for sure, though some say that he returned to the Valley of Shinobi. And again, I'll give the game this. It has more of an ending than certain NES games and even some of the other Shinobi games we played. But that's the Cyber Shinobi. It's a piece of shit. There is nothing redeemable here, I feel. The music's not great. The game runs slow. The stages are too sluggish for their own good. The game doesn't control well. The only reason I would ever think of playing this again is maybe if I was doing like a marathon live stream where I played all the games. Or if you wanted to buy the game yourself, the only reason I would say to do it is if you were going for the complete collection. Which again, this game was only released in Europe, Asia, and Brazil, or Europe, Australia, and Brazil. So you're a bit limited in terms of finding carts for that, and I doubt it's worth it anyway. Thankfully, though, we're only going uphill from here, as every Shinobi game we're going to play after this, which I think is it 4 games more? Yeah, 4 more games. They just keep going up in quality from here. So if anything, in a way, it could be looked at them needing to hit rock bottom before they actually realized, oh shit, let's make good games. I don't like being angry or disliking a game this actively, but this just is not worth your time. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the Game Gear Shinobi games. See you guys then.